This short training video will help you to understand the fifth practice of the Fundamental Five, critical writing, and provide tips and specific examples for how you can immediately implement this practice in your teaching. The following are the five critical practices that Sean Kane and Mike Laird identified through their research as being at the core of highly effective teaching. Each of these are discussed in detail in their book, The Fundamental Five, the Formula for Quality Instruction. For the purposes of this video, we are going to focus on the fifth practice, writing critically. Kane and Laird, the authors who researched and formulated the Fundamental Five, found critical writing to be the least frequently used of the practices. This could be for many reasons. However, one reason that could clearly impact the frequency of daily critical writing in our classes is a misunderstanding of the concept. In their research, Kane and Laird found that the concept of frequent critical writing practices was the most misunderstood of the five fundamental practices for quality instruction. Many teachers confuse critical writing with the length or weight of the writing rather than the cognitive processing of new information just explored in a lesson with prior knowledge. Many teachers report that critical writing is something that takes a lot of time and research, and they just don't have the time to perform this on a regular basis. However, if you see critical writing as a critical thinking process that allows students to put into their words their understanding of the ideas being studied, then you can begin to see how doing this practice daily could be very beneficial to deepening students' understanding. While it is the least practice of the five practices, it is the one where students truly make meaning out of what they are learning. So how do we turn this weighty concept into something that can be done on a daily practice in each lesson? To answer this question, we can begin to look at critical writing from a new perspective. So, what is critical writing? In short, it is the writing for a purpose of each student practicing mental manipulation of new information while integrating it with their existing knowledge frameworks. Research into memory has identified processes and functional structures that support the idea of mental manipulation as a way of strengthening neural pathways related to integrating new knowledge and moving information from short-term memory to long-term memory. Now, what teacher would not want to strengthen this practice? Putting practical terms, critical writing is writing for the purpose of organizing, clarifying, defending, refuting, analyzing, dissecting, connecting, and/or expanding. Listen and reflect on the following quote about the process of critical writing. To gain knowledge, we must construct it in our minds. Writing what we are trying to internalize helps us to achieve that purpose. When we are able to make connections in writing, we begin to take ownership of those connections. To do this, we must learn how to identify core ideas and then explain those ideas in writing. So, what is critical writing in the context of the Fundamental Five? Let us look at what it is and what it is not. Critical writing is something that all students do individually. It should be done during the last 5 minutes of the class to provide a way for students to check on their understanding and to reflect on what they just learned. Critical writing in this format will provide physical evidence that learning has occurred, and this evidence is visible to both the student and the teacher who quickly reviews the daily writing. Finally, you can use critical writing exercise as a way to complete the lesson frame by linking the prompt back to the objective for the day's lesson. Critical writing is not something completed in groups. It is not a quiz, test, and while tests and quizzes may contain writing exercises, they do not serve the purpose of daily critical writing. Again, keep the process in mind, and you can see how this type of writing serves a different purpose than that which might occur during a test or quiz. Critical writing should also be low stakes, as it is a place where students can get messy with their thinking. Therefore, critical writing assignments should not be graded. Finally, students must write. A verbal reflection does not perform the same function in the learning process as a written reflection. Now, let's take a quick look at the different forms of writing that you might use in your own class. Keeping in mind that critical writing in the Fundamental Five is process-oriented and should be completed in no more than 5 minutes at the end of class. Here's a list of writing forms that you might consider for your classroom. It is also important to realize that students in all subject areas will benefit from critical writing in some form. As you look over this list, identify the writing forms that you feel would best fit your subject and style of teaching. While not exhaustive, this list includes prompts for writing short 5-minute essays, analogies, as well as the 1-minute response. You might also allow students to work from their notes and write a list of ideas or questions to summarize their learning for the day. Students may also be asked to develop a mind map representing their understanding or write in an ongoing journal. Exit tickets can also be very useful for this type of writing, and if performed electronically, can make the implementation and review of student critical writing very easy. The listing of and exploration of all of these writing forms is far beyond the scope of this training. We will take a quick look at the exit ticket as something you might be able to implement tomorrow. Here's a process that will allow you to quickly put an exit ticket online for class tomorrow. Simply go to Google Drive and create a Google form for your exit ticket. What will you put in your exit ticket is up to you. I will show you an example later of one that is very simple and flexible to use. Once you have created the form, place a link to the exit ticket form in your learning management system so that students can easily access the document at the end of class. You can also show the students how to make a web clip on their smartphone. This will allow students to access the exit ticket directly from their phone as if it were an app on their phone. To implement the exit ticket, you need to make sure that you have reserved the final 5 minutes of class for students to complete the form. If you do not currently practice critical writing at the end of class, you might consider setting a timer to alert you when the 5 minutes are left in your lesson. Depending on how you make your exit ticket, you can leverage different writing prompts for each day. The example you will see has an open question that allows for different prompts to be used each day. Finally, the results of the exit ticket for the class are aggregated in an associated spreadsheet, making it easy for you, the teacher, to quickly look over your students' responses. Now let's take a look at this in process. There is a link to the exit ticket placed prominently in the class learning management system. This view shows what it might look like on a computer. When a student clicks the link, they are taken directly to the form where they can complete all required and optional questions. For students working from their cell phone, the following is a screenshot from an iPhone showing the exit ticket link in a learning management system. When a student clicks this link, the following form opens, allowing them to complete the same questions, but from the computer they have in their pocket. Now let's take a closer look at the questions in this sample exit ticket. The ticket opens with the student entering their name. This is important information for analysis of the class responses and will help you to better help your students in need. The next question is simply a checkbox allowing the student to quickly reflect on how well they feel they understood what was covered that day. This is followed by another checkbox question that asks the student to reflect on how well they prepared themselves for the day's lesson. This is especially important as it requires the student to evaluate their own performance on preparing for the lesson of the day. Students evaluating this should consider their reading and review of notes the night before, as well as any homework that was assigned. The next question is free response and asks students to summarize what they learned that day. This is an especially illuminating question when you look at the responses across the entire class. Final required question asks students to think about any big questions they might have coming out of the day's lesson. These questions might be content related and specific to what was covered, or might reflect deeper thinking and demonstrate how students are able to apply what they know by asking questions that integrate what was just presented with bigger questions in the field of study. The last question is optional and open. This question allows the teacher to ask any question as a prompt for the day's lesson. This can be a specific query for understanding or more general questions. The important thing is that you have students reflecting and writing critically about what they learned that day and trying to connect that with any prior knowledge. Using Google Forms this way allows you to, with a glance, look at the results of the exit ticket. This information can be used to identify students who need extra help or find common misconceptions which can then be used to inform the next day's lesson. This method also allows you to create a record over the entire course of how students have come to understand what you have taught them. This then becomes a valuable tool for improving your craft as a teacher. While we have taken a close look at the way you can create an online exit ticket for critical writing at the end of the class, a quick look back at the list of writing forms should allow you to see how you can easily modify this process to create additional writing forms using a similar process. This means that you can create several different critical writing exercises that you can link in your learning management system to be used purposefully with your students. Now it's time to put this practice into action. Returning to our old quote about why critical writing is so important. Everything we write is a potential learning experience. Writing is a systematic process for learning essential meanings. Your task is to take the next 5 minutes and on a piece of paper or on your computer, write a response to this question. What obstacles might I have to overcome to implement critical writing in my classroom, and how can I make those changes in order to implement critical writing next week? The parting challenge is for you to change your practice by adding one of the least used but most effective practices of the Critical Five. For the good of your students, give your students the last 5 minutes of each class next week to think deeply about their learning and engage them in critical writing. As an extension and additional challenge, you can engage in your own critical writing exercise at the end of each day as you reflect on the impact of critical writing in your practice. Remember, it only takes 5 minutes, and everyone has 5 minutes to give to personal growth.